I want to open up with a question this morning, and it's one that you've probably heard, and it's going to be up here on the screen behind me. It's, is it worth it? Is it worth it? This could mean a lot of different things. Like your friend could come up to you and they could ask you like, hey man, you should buy this $60 video game so we can play it for 2 weeks and then get bored of it. And you're like kind of like, man, is it worth it? Or someone's like trying to talk about Disney Plus, like, man, Disney Plus is so cool. It's got all the shows, it's got all the movies, it's got Marvel, it's got Star Wars. And you're kind of like, is it worth it? We got to try Joella's Chicken, that new chicken place that opened up on Veterans Parkway. And you're like, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Have you guys been there? I think it's worth it. It's pretty good. Is it worth it? Even your mom might phrase it this way, was it worth it? Like right after you do something dumb, maybe your mom's been like, was it worth it? Was it worth it? When you try to do a backflip gainer off your roof into your swimming pool in the backyard and you miss and you end up in the hospital, your mom's like, now was that worth it? Yes, it was absolutely worth it. Or, you pull an Uncle Terry. I think all of us have done this before, at least I have because I'm crazy. But when someone lights a firework, you might jump over it just to see what would happen and you catch fire. Just kidding, that never happened to me. But someone might say to you, your mom might be like, was it worth it? Was it worth doing that, right? So that happened to my sister. She had to ask this question, was it worth it? Here's a picture of my sister and I up here on the screen. We actually went to college together. So she was 1 year younger than me. So for 3 of the years I was in college, we got to go together, which was really cool. Me and my sister were really tight. We're good friends. That was us at a Halloween party. I was a Jedi. I think she was like a burglar or something like that. But anyways, we got to hang out a lot together. We had the same friend group. And what was really cool about that is we got to do stuff, together off campus. And one of the things that our friend group enjoyed doing is going to this place called the Fort Dickerson Quarry. The Fort Dickerson Quarry. That's that place on the left up there on the screen behind me. Now, the Fort Dickerson Quarry, if you don't know what a quarry is, it's basically where there's surrounding hills and mountainsides, and they blast the rock out of it, and it basically creates a giant pit. In fact, the pit was about 350 feet deep, but it filled with water. It was really close to downtown Knoxville, so me and my sister and our friends, a lot of times we would go to this quarry, and we would swim. They had a little beach area. People from all over Knoxville. It's kind of like this hidden gem, this secret spot people would go to hang out. It was a lot of fun. It was kind of freaky because the water was like crystal clear and you could look down and it just got darker and darker. So that was kind of freaky, but it was almost kind of like magical at the same time. It was really cool. But one of the most fun things to do there was cliff jumping. It's exactly as it sounds. You go up to those cliffs and you would jump off into the water, and it was fun. I know that doesn't sound fun for all of you, but trust me, it's not like the high dive at the swimming pool. It was really fun. And the water was so deep, you didn't have to worry about rocks or trees or anything like that. So I kid you not, the one we would jump off was probably close to the size of the ceiling. And imagine the gym floor is like the water down below. That's what we were dealing with here. So we would do cliff jumping as a form of fun. But my sister always chickened out. She never wanted to go. And I would just convince her. I'd be like, come on, Rachel, you got to come with us. It's so much fun to go cliff jumping. It's a blast. You got to try it. And she was like, no, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not meeting Jesus this morning. And we're like, come on, you got to come with us. It's so much fun. And finally, she was like, all right. So we get her to the edge of the cliff. And we're up there, we're looking down, and Rachel's like, I don't think I can do this. We're like, come on, Rachel, come on. All our friends, there was like 10 of us, we were like, Rachel. She's like, fine, I'll do it. And everyone was like, yeah, let's go. And we were all stoked that she was gonna do this. And I said, okay, now Rachel, there's something you gotta keep in mind when you cliff jump. At this height, you gotta do something called a pencil dive. You guys know what a pencil dive is? Yeah, we were like, you gotta go like this, and just literally just jump in the water like a pencil dive, because at that height, you could really hurt yourself. In fact, certain heights, if you jump off high enough, water is like concrete. So you had to jump like a pencil dive or you could seriously hurt yourself. Even people would wear water shoes sometimes because it would kind of sting the bottom of your feet, even when you did a pencil dive. So she's like, okay. I was like, let me show you. So I pencil dived off first. I jumped in, just as fun as ever, and I kind of swam away so she had an area to jump off the cliff into. And I was like, come on, Rachel, come on down. It's so awesome. And she was like, okay. And we were like, 3, 2, 1, and she jumped. Now, I told her pencil dive, but she must have heard something different because she pulled one of these. She held her nose, and she was like this. She was like she was sitting in a chair, And for the first time in human history, I got to witness the world's first ever atomic butt flop, okay? Her butt just smacked the water. And I just remember she came out of the water and she was like, it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. And basically, she bruised her tailbone. And if anyone's ever had a tailbone injury, she couldn't really sit for a while because it would hurt. And she had to lay on her stomach and stuff. It was bad news. I was like, sorry, Rachel. And she never has given in to peer pressure ever since. But anyways, that was a silly example of is it worth it? But we ask ourselves that question every day. Is it worth it? About different things, right? And one of the things I want to talk about today is when it comes to God and following Jesus, is it worth it? Because in this world, Jesus says, there will be trouble in this world. You will have trouble, but fear not, for I have overcome the world. And what Jesus was saying here is that if you bear the name of Jesus and you follow him in this world, there will be people who come against you. There will be people who try to hammer you back down. There will be people who try to silence you, and it will be difficult. But Jesus is saying, fear not, because I'm with you in it all. It's going to be okay. It's going to be worth it. And there's going to be a question you have to ask yourself when you become a Christian. And an answer we have to ask ourselves this morning is following Jesus worth it? And I hope I can help you answer that question this morning. You know, through this series, we've talked about the Hero Hall of Faith in Hebrews 11, where it lists off all these different heroes throughout the Bible. And the author is sharing these examples of biblical heroes to this church. It was this early church right after Jesus went back into heaven, and this church was being severely persecuted. They were basically, the government was like, stop being a Christian, or we're going to throw you in jail, we're going to kill you, or we're going to take your home away. And these Christians were faced with, man, do I give up on God? Or do I say Jesus is worth it? Like, how do you convince a group of people who are facing persecution that Jesus is worth it? You got to show them a hero. And that's exactly what the author does. And we've looked at these different hero examples, but today we're not looking at just one hero. We're actually looking at a group of heroes, and these heroes are called martyrs. Maybe you've never heard that word before, but a martyr is someone who has died for Jesus, someone who gave their life for Jesus. Someone said, stop preaching the gospel, stop being a Christian. They said no, and they were killed. That is a martyr. And this is what the author has to say about these heroes. Hebrews 11, verse 35 through 38. This is pretty intense. It says this, but others were tortured, refusing to turn from God in order to be set free. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. Some were jeered at, and their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained in prisons. Some died by stoning, some were sawed in half, and others were killed by the sword. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, destitute and oppressed and mistreated. They were too good for this world, wandering over deserts and mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the ground. Now, when I read this, it sounds like, man, is following Jesus worth it? Because they were going through some pretty intense stuff. This is saying that these Christians who refused to stop following Jesus, some of them were thrown in prison, sawed in half, stabbed with swords, kicked out of their homes, and hiding out in caves so they could escape the persecution. They had to leave their home and live in the desert or the mountains or the wilderness. How is that worth it? Like, there must be something special about this Jesus guy that these Christians would say, death with Jesus is better than life without Jesus. Why is that? Why is death with Jesus better than life without Jesus? Well, to help answer that question, I want to share a famous missionary. His name is Jim Elliot. His picture's up behind me. And he proved that with his life. He was about my age, actually. He was 28. I'm 29, but he was 28 years old. And he felt a calling on God to share Jesus with this unreached people group. If you ever hear someone say unreached people group, it's basically a group of people who've never heard about Jesus yet. And there was this tribe in South America called the Auca tribe. And people really feared this tribe because any outsiders who would come near the tribe would be attacked and killed or had spears thrown at them. So they just felt this calling like, that is somebody who really needs Jesus. They're violent, they're aggressive, they hurt innocent people. Like, they need Jesus more than anyone else. So Jim Elliot and a couple of his friends and their families, they started to learn Auca phrases. They started to try to learn from surrounding tribes that were peaceful, like learn about their culture. And then they started to take airplanes and fly over the Auca tribe, and they would drop care packages down to them. To show that they had good intent, to show that they could be trusted, they would drop care packages of food. And finally, the day came where they were ready to land the plane, and the three husbands, I believe it was three, it might have been four, the three husbands landed in this little airstrip, this little beach area along this river where they could land the plane. And they actually made contact with some Aucas. They cooked breakfast for them, they gave them gifts. They even took one up in the airplane and gave them an airplane ride. And when they came back down, they dropped him off again, and then they didn't see him for 2 days. For 2 days, they went back to the same spot, and then finally they saw a couple Aucas coming out of the woods, and they were so excited to meet them, and they ran up to them, and then all of a sudden they heard shouting behind them, and behind them on the other side of the river, there was a group of tribal men with spears, and basically they were going to attack and kill these three young men. They were going to kill them. And one of them had a gun on them. They had a pistol on them. And basically sources show that they chose not to draw their weapon because they didn't want to basically kill any of these tribal members who don't know Jesus yet. Because they knew Jesus, but these tribal members didn't. So they chose to take the end of the spear, and they all died. They gave their life for Jesus. And you might hear that and you're like, is it worth it? All they did was dropped a couple care packages off and cooked breakfast for them. Was that even worth it? Was Jesus worth it? Well, we're going to find out later that it was worth it. Because though they gave their lives and it might seem meaningless, it might seem like it was pointless, like it wasn't worth it, their sacrifice made a way for Elizabeth Elliot, which was Jim Elliot's wife, to go back to the Auca tribe. And she built trust with them, and they let her survive. They let her even come into the tribe and teach school and teach them, to learn their language more. And they actually got so close with the Aucas. To this day, that tribe is now one of the most peaceful tribes out of all the tribes, and many of them are Christians. But if those three men didn't give their lives for Jesus, Elizabeth Elliot and the wives of that group may not have been able to go into that tribe and share Jesus with them and to build that trust and to show that unconditional love. Because I don't know about you, if someone killed my wife, the last thing I would want to do is go in and share Jesus and the love of Jesus with those people because they killed someone I love dearly. But they believed that Jesus was worth it. They believed that Jesus was everything. And one of my favorite quotes from Jim Elliot is this, and he lived this out. He put his money where his mouth was. He said this, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." Guys, in this life, you're going to have a lot of stuff. You're going to have money. You're going to have things. You're going to have friendships. You're going to have one day maybe a house or a car or a job that you love. But I want to tell you this right now, it doesn't matter how much stuff or how rich you get or how many dreams you fulfill that you desire, all that will matter one day is whether or not you know Jesus and you live for him. Because when you die one day, none of those things are going to come with you. They're temporary. The riches are temporary. They don't last forever. But the one thing that will last forever is Jesus. Would you rather put all your poker chips, so to speak, in the basket that says, man, this stuff is awesome, but it only lasts for a temporary amount of time? Or would you rather put everything on Jesus that lasts forever? Our worship pastor, Aquila, recently shared a story about Jesus. And the Bible describes this woman who falls at Jesus' feet. And it says that she is a sinful woman. And she falls at Jesus' feet and she pours out a bottle of expensive perfume that would have equaled about a year's salary. And she probably didn't have a lot. This was probably literally her pouring out everything she had on the feet of Jesus. And she wiped the perfume on his feet with her hair. And the disciples are just watching around this dinner table with pure disgust. They're like, man, why is this sinner getting near Jesus? Don't let her in here. She wasted that money. That money could have been used to sell the perfume and give it to the poor. Man, why? Well, that's a waste. She wasted it. That's not worth it. Because they believed that Jesus wasn't worth it. Now, you might not have an expensive bottle of perfume, but when you pour out the perfume of your life upon the feet of Jesus, there's going to be people who say, that's not worth it. You're giving your life to Jesus? That's not worth it. That whole God thing, that's just a phase. You'll grow out of it. Jesus isn't worth it. Just like the disciples said, it wasn't worth it. There's going to be people who tell you, give it up. Jesus isn't worth it. I had a professor in Bible college, and it's really cool. He was actually my youth ministry professor. So if you ever go to Bible college and want to become a youth pastor, you actually have teachers that are youth pastor teachers. It teach you, they were probably youth pastors themselves for a long time, and they teach you how to be a youth pastor. Those were my favorite classes, obviously. It was a lot of fun. It was a blast. But one of my favorite youth ministry professors, his name was John Pryor, and John shared a story with the class about when he first was called to become a youth pastor. He was at church. He felt the calling of Jesus on his life to become a youth minister, and he was so excited to share it with his friends and his family, and he shared it with them, expecting them to be excited, and this is what they said to him. They said, John, and you had so much promise with your life. John, you had so much going for you. You could be a businessman and do really well and make a great living. It's so disappointing that you're throwing your life away to serve pizza to a bunch of brats. And I was like, dang, that's his family told him that. Because they thought Jesus wasn't worth it. But John thought, man, Jesus, investing in the next generation for Jesus was worth it. Because there's going to be people who tell you Jesus isn't worth it. Jesus is worth everything. There's nothing more worth it than him. And I know that John made a difference, and I know what John did was worth it because I was one of the people that he impacted in that class. Because there's moments where I was like, man, I'm not sure if this youth ministry thing is for me. And hearing his stories and hearing what he taught me reignited that passion I had for youth ministry. And he was a youth pastor for years and a senior pastor for years. And he's impacted so many people and gotten to baptize so many people and seen so much life change. Jesus used him in amazing ways, but he also got to teach a class full of hundreds of college-age students when I was in college. And man, almost all of them are youth pastors now. He got to invest in the next generation. And those family members who doubted him, who said, you're just serving pizza to brats, who said Jesus isn't worth it, thank God that Jesus didn't listen to them because he made an impact in so many lives. You might give up a lot for Jesus, but it's always worth it. There's this verse that I love. It's from John 15:13, and Jesus says this to his disciples. He says, there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. Because you probably won't die for Jesus in America. I'm not saying you won't. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but in America, that's probably not something you're going to face. But that still doesn't excuse us for giving our lives to Jesus, with the way we live our life, with everything we do to share Jesus with others. And guys, Jesus is calling us in the Great Commission that there is a lost and dying world that is dying without Jesus, and their only hope of heaven is you and I going to preach the gospel. And are we going to say, is it worth it? Or do we say, man, I'm putting my poker chips in the basket that says, it's not worth it. I'd rather just live for the things in this life that don't last. Some of the hero stories I think of in comic books and movies, some of the most emotional, impactful to me are the stories where a hero lays down their life to save someone else. And that's derived from Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate example of someone laying down their life for someone else. So I want to ask you, are you willing to do that? No, you might not have to die, but are you willing to give everything you have, your whole life, to help save others? You might have to lose some stuff. You might lose a group of friends. You know, you might not be as well liked by your coach if your coach isn't a Christian. You might not get as much playing time. You might have to leave some friends behind because they're holding you back from following and sharing Jesus with others. You might not get to go to that party that all your friends are going to, and you might have to miss out. I've shared these things with you before. What you will gain is far more greater than what you'll give up. And that's our hero takeaway this morning, is that God uses those who give it all to save others, to be a hero. Are you one of those people who say, I'm willing to give up everything to save someone else, to tell someone else about heaven, to save someone else from hell? Am I willing to be that person that God uses to give it all to save others, to be a hero? I hope all of us can say it's worth it. Let's pray. Dear Jesus, thank you so much for everyone in this room, for a topic that's so serious and so extreme and scary. Give us courage and confidence and to know that you are worth it, God. Thank you for examples of people who were willing to give it all for you and really live out your example, Jesus, of sacrificial love, that no matter what happens, you're going to share Jesus with others. So I pray that we could have that courage, God. I pray you could be with us. I pray that you could help us believe that you are worth it over anything in this world that they can offer us, God. And Jesus, I pray that even if it means we only impact one person with our life, each of us could think about that one that we have influence over, that we could share Jesus with. That if we invited them to the church, they'd probably come, and if they heard the gospel, they might actually respond. Jesus, I pray for the heart of that person and the heart of those who are going to invite. It's in Jesus' awesome name we pray. Amen.